Hello, everybody. Welcome to Think on This. I'm your host, Eddie Burns, and I'm excited about today's episode. With us today, we have Colin O'Neill. Hello, Colin.
Hi, Eddie.
I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm going to read a little bio here of Colin. Colin is an author. He just finished a book, consultant and entrepreneur with 40 years of experience consulting Fortune 100 companies in all levels of government. In 2011, he co founded Scaled Agile, where he collaborated with Dean Lallingwell and others to create the Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFE, the world's leading approach for scaling agility across organizations. Since leaving Scaled Agile, Colin has helped clients connect their organization's strategy to execution through value streams, portfolios, and the use of derivative goals at all levels. He recently published a book titled Take Control by Giving Up Control, the value centered fast track to organization growth, which introduces his innovative model called Entity Value Realization, or for short, EVER. Colin, thanks again for being here.
You're welcome, Eddie. Thanks for inviting me.
What do you see as the top challenges or problems for your typical company these days?
Sure. So the problems that I've seen and experienced over the last 40 years are basically strategy is disconnected from execution. And what that means is that the people at the top have some vision or some goals in mind. They have something in mind that they want to accomplish, whether it's positioning their company in some way, shape, or form, whether it's market share, whether it's who knows what. And they talk about that amongst themselves. It's not communicated in a way to the people that are actually building the products and services and delivering them. And so there's this huge disconnect between the strategic intent and how people do their daily jobs. Number two is that workers today are different from the workers of 20, 30 years ago. The newer generations, they show up for work differently than we used to. And I don't mean it in a derogatory way. Basically, their
It's
value
true.
systems are different than ours. They're not easily controlled in this command and control structure that has occurred for the last 100 years. Command and control doesn't work anymore. We're not taking advantage of that. We need to engage them differently than we did before. And the way we do that is not by controlling them, but by enabling them, by giving them specific guidelines and helping them understand what the goals and strategies are, which I'll explain a little bit later.
Okay.
And then within those guidelines, let them go. Let them go innovate. Let them go improve the products and services that are being delivered. And then, a manager's job or a leader's job now is to just create that environment, that constructive environment that allows them to do those things. But all of these issues are systemic to all types
Mhm.
of organizations, and that's why I named my recent book "Take Control by Giving Up Control." It's a conundrum, but it has to be that way because they simply don't respond to command and control structures the way we used to. The third reason, or the third thing that I see in the world today, is that organizations are not close to their customers. They're not close enough to their customers. They don't really understand that consumers today, for them, it's all about value. And that's also why I call it the entity value realization system, because value is the new currency of the modern economy. And it's an experiential economy. People want an experience, not just a product or a service. They want to feel good about something. They want to feel that it meets their inner needs. And these are the things we've been missing for a long time, is what are the feelings or values that our consumers have that they want and expect as part of the value proposition. And too often companies do not take the time to bring their representatives of their user or customer base their into their internal planning and strategizing and product development work, because they don't do that, they don't understand the subtleties that the consumers are looking for. And when a company knows the subtleties, and the best example I can think of is Apple. I mean, they know. I mean, they understand the deep seated feelings that people want when they buy an Apple product, and they're in it for the experience. And so that's another big change, is the experiential economy is now based on value. So we have to be more focused on value. That's number three.
And so there's a lot of companies are playing catch up with this mindset, I take it.
I don't even think they're playing catch up. I don't even think they realize that they need to be doing this. And that's part
Yeah.
of the problem, is
Yeah. Yeah.
the entity value realization system, the business system, is essentially says one of the tenets is you've got to bring your customers closer to you. We use what we call fusion teams at various levels of the organization. So we want business people, technology people, marketing people, and the customer to join together in a fusion team to really dig into what it is that their customers want experientially. And when they get to that, then their products take on a whole new level of meaning and interest to the market.
So that kind of, I think, will lead us into the next question, the goal strategy outcomes, or GSOs.
Mm-hmm. So GSOs are things that essentially are communicated down the organization. Now but it's not forced on the organizations below. So at the highest level, at the ETL level, the executive leadership, or ELT, executive leadership team level, basically they come up with the goals that they want to achieve for a certain time period, whether it's annually, biannually, triannually, it doesn't matter. And the goals are what drives the execution. Many companies say, "Oh, here's our strategy." Well, the strategy is typically not measurable. And so we want goals to be measurable and very clear and crisp. And it's the outcomes of the goals that we're striving to achieve. So the executive leadership team has to sit down and be disciplined and say, these are our 3 to 5 goals for, let's say, this year. And for each goal, we want 3 to 5 different outcomes. However they want to measure that, but they're different outcomes. And then once they have the outcomes and the goal, then they say, okay, what's the best way we can do this? Now, the way to do it is how to execute is the strategy. So strategy is the
Okay.
how, goal is the what. All right. And this is a change in mindset, because
Okay.
strategies themselves are not measurable. They're just how we're going to achieve our goal. So we need to change the vernacular and the definitions of some of these words so that they have more crisp meaning and are not so vague.
Some
Now,
of the outcomes,
yes,
I'm sorry, that some of the outcomes might be this, what's the value for the consumer that you were just talking about with Apple,
it,
right?
it, it could be. So for example, let's say a company says we want to increase our customer base by 15% this year. Okay. We
Okay.
want to grow our customer base by 15%. Okay, that's a great goal. Now, how do we know that we've achieved that goal? What are the outcomes that we need to measure
Mhm.
to say, oh, yes, we've achieved that 15% or more? And so we think about, all right, what are we going to measure? Well, and not just at the end. Okay, 15% is the sort of the target metric, but getting there and the strategies we use to get there, the work down into chunks, and we run experiments. And so we create these leading indicators that say at the end of the first quarter, we expect X. Now, it doesn't mean we expect 5%. It means that we're trending in the right direction because we're still experimenting with the ways that we think we're going to increase our customer base. So, for example, at a lower level, that GSO of increase the customer base by 15%, as it translates down into the business units and into the program layers, basically they write their own GSOs in support of the high level GSOs, and they say, how can my unit contribute to this overall goal of getting this 15% increase in customer base? Well, they run experiments. Oh, well, let's try this. Let's add this new feature to our product. Let's advertise this in a different way. Let's appeal to a different demographic. So there's a bunch of different ways that the organization, different parts of the organization, can contribute to that overall corporate goal. And
Yeah,
so they run these
yeah.
experiments and see what sticks and see what begins to drive the numbers, what moves the needle towards increasing the customer base.
Take control by giving it up.
Right,
This is making sense, right?
right,
Where you're allowing people to do what they do best,
correct.
and and experiment and not punish them for taking chances.
That's
But
correct.
s so if I understand you, it's almost as if, you've got the GSO from leadership, it goes down the line, let's say,
Mhm.
to the divisional level, and then they create a GSO, and then the product level, they create their own GSO, and there's a constant, I guess, massaging and a room for experimentation because, hey, we don't know for sure yet. We think it's going to be very successful. We think this is the way, but it may change and over time, right? And based on the where it is in the process.
And the levels below, they look at the GSOs above and they say, how can my organization, my division or whatever, how can we support that GSO? So we write our own GSOs. We write our
Uh
own
huh.
goals and we write our own outcomes. And then we determine what we think are the best strategies. And all of
Right.
those outcomes at each level are measured, and they're measured
Okay.
frequently. And
Yeah.
so they can be measured monthly or quarterly. But let's say at the end of every quarter, there's this sort of corporate wide check in. And all of the parts of the organization that are contributing to this goal of increasing the user base by 15%, they're looked at and they say, well, we ran some experiments and these two experiments didn't work, but this one seems to resonate with our customers. And so we believe that we've already noticed an increase or a higher level of interest or whatever. So let's pursue this one and let's not pursue those other ones that didn't seem to work. What happens is that business leaders, they set these goals for the year and they say, oh, we're going to do it this way, and they set it and forget it. But that is loaded with assumptions, and we just don't know what those assumptions are, and it takes on now a high risk because we could go a year and not know that our experiment failed. So that's why we run these
Ah.
little experiments. We get regular, frequent feedback, and that informs how are we moving the needle? Are we moving in the right direction? And if we're not,
And
then we pivot.
one of the great benefits of what you're talking about is that feedback system, it seems like, right? And this feedback system that you have,
Mhm.
it allows that to happen in a nice structure and process.
Correct. It happens organically. Yeah, it's built into
Uh-huh.
the system. Mhm.
And does this tie into the steel thread?
Yes. So the GSO steel thread is basically saying that the GSOs that are written at the executive level are basically published to the business units. The business units look at those and say, how can we contribute to those? And they write their own GSOs, but everything's tied. You can link it, right? So the GSOs written at the business unit level are directly tied to and in support of the corporate GSOs. And At the divisional level in the business unit, their GSOs are tied to the business unit. So it's all linked together, and we can roll this data up as we collect the metrics at each level. It rolls up and it says, are we moving the needle on these higher level outcomes?
I did read your book. I loved your book. So, anybody out there that hasn't read it, you can find it on Amazon. It's Take Control by Giving Up Control. And you can also connect with Colin on LinkedIn. That's Colin O'Neill. And you can find, can you find a link to your book on Amazon on your LinkedIn page?
I believe so. Well, first of all, let me just say that it's an ebook and it costs less than $10.
Right.
Correct. And the other thing about the book is it's basically how to implement the system. It's not just theory. It's basically here's what you do. Here's step by step. Takes you through the
Hmm.
process. These are the things you need to do, and this is how they interrelate. So it's very implementable.
And then tell me about your partnership with a software company together.
Yes. So we're working with a couple of software tool vendors that basically allow companies to track all of this stuff, as we talked about in the steel thread, the linkages between the various levels, and then capturing the data and rolling that up to determine are we actually, on track to meet our outcomes or not, because we need the data, right? This is a data driven system. And so we set up the metrics that we need based on the outcomes that we desire. We capture those metrics and then we report them up the chain. And up the chain needs to recognize that we're running experiments, and so some of these things are not gonna work. But that's good because it tells us what you know. It makes us smarter because we say, okay, this didn't work. We thought it was going to work, but it didn't. So let's try this other thing, which was our second choice, and see if that's going to move the needle. So the tooling is essentially going to capture is well, it does capture all of this data and then make it consumable at higher levels of the organization so leaders can have their finger on the pulse without micromanaging.
It's
Remember, so I said four. So the first one
right.
was strategy disconnected from execution. The second was people don't work the way we used to work. They don't respond to control like we used to. And the third was getting the customers closer to us so we understand the subtleties of the experience they desire. And the
Mhm.
fourth is this massive technological change that has basically completely rewritten business and government and the whole landscape with artificial intelligence, all these advanced technologies. Basically, they're there to enable workers and organizations, all entities, to really step up their game and do much more with what they already have. And basically, the technologies that are available are almost all interconnecting technologies. And so, if we recognize that our workers are intelligent, they're technological, logically savvy, and they can they can adapt very quickly to this changing technology infrastructure, then essentially we want to network them together. We want to create a collective consciousness in our organization that allows our workers to do all of the things we just talked about, but on steroids, basically, getting exponential returns. So if we embrace the new technologies and honor the savvy of our new workers, then the innovation potential is so high that you can't even imagine how much potential there is until you start looking at how these technologies interconnect people. And so essentially it's like an exponential growth in terms of innovation and creativity.
Yeah, and of course, when quantum computers get into the mainstream, it'll do in flashes what any the largest computer today can do
Right.
in days or weeks or months. It's amazing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so all of this is either here or it's coming or it's very near. And if companies aren't ready to exploit that by setting up the right environment, by enabling their people, by networking their folks together and with these high technologies, by giving up control, by within clear guidelines through CRISP and GSOs. If they are not able to do that, they're going to be left behind.
Great. Great stuff, Colin.
Thank you.
Is there anything that I might have left out?
I just want to touch
Can I wrap up with?
on the adaptive nature. So you're absolutely right. We if we look at the life itself and the animal kingdom, and it's all about adaptability, and that's why humans, we basically rule the planet is because we were able to adapt due to our brain capacity. Basically, adaptive leaders that can adapt. And I didn't make up that term. That the term came from other folks a lot smarter than me. But leaders who adapt to the changes, and like you said, the changes are happening so rapidly that if you're not adaptable, you die. You're like a dinosaur. So not only are leaders adaptable, but organizations need to be adaptable too. And so in the book, I talk about how to create that adaptability and leverage that to stay ahead of the competition and actually create your own market and your own niche.
Well, really, I love your book. I love what you're doing. I love, well, everything about it. For anybody that is interested in reading more about this model, you can go to Colin O'Neill on LinkedIn, or you can go to Amazon and look for Take Control by Giving Up Control. Well, Colin, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care, buddy.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.